September 4th, 476 AD. A teenage boy woke up that morning as the Emperor of Rome. By the end of the day, he was nobody. No battle, no explosion, no dramatic last stand. He just handed over his crown, packed a bag, and left. And with that, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen was over. Just like that. But here's the part nobody tells you. Nobody noticed. The people walking through Rome that morning had no idea their world had just ended. The bread sellers were still selling bread. The baths were still open. The streets were still full. Life just continued. And that might be the strangest part of the whole story. Let's start with the boy. His name was Romulus Augustulus. And yes, historians noticed the irony immediately. Romulus was the name of the man who founded Rome over 1,000 years before this. Augustus was the name of Rome's greatest emperor. This kid had both names, and he was the last one. He was around 14 years old when he became emperor, not because he was chosen, not because he was exceptional, because his father put him there. His father's name was Orestes, a general, a power-hungry one. He wanted to control the empire, but he didn't want the title. So he put his teenage son on the throne and pulled all the strings from behind it. This was not unusual by 476 AD. Rome had been doing this for decades. Emperors were being made and unmade every few years. Some lasted months. One lasted 70 days. By the time Romulus sat on the throne, the Western Roman Empire didn't actually control most of Europe anymore. No Britain, no France, no Spain, no North Africa, just Italy. That's what was left. The most powerful empire in history, reduced to one peninsula, and even that was barely held together. Here's how it actually ended. Rome's army, by this point, wasn't really Roman anymore. For over a century, Rome had been hiring Germanic soldiers to fight its wars. They were called the foederati. Basically, mercenary warriors from outside the empire fighting for Rome because Rome paid them. And for a long time, it worked. But Rome was broke. And broke empires make promises they can't keep. Orestes, the emperor's father, and the man actually running things, made a deal with these soldiers. Fight for us, and we'll give you land in Italy. They fought. He didn't give them the land. The soldiers chose a new leader. His name was Odoacer. He was a Germanic general who had been working inside the Roman military for years. He knew exactly how the system worked, and he knew it was finished. Odoacer marched his men to Ravenna, the capital of the Western Empire at the time. Not Rome. Ravenna. Rome hadn't actually been the capital for decades. The emperors had quietly moved to Ravenna because it was easier to defend. Odoacer's army took the city. Orestes, the puppet master, tried to flee. He was caught and executed. Then Odoacer walked into the palace. And instead of killing the teenage emperor, he did something nobody expected. He let him go. Romulus Augustulus handed over the imperial crown, the purple robes, the symbols of 1,000 years of Roman power. Odoacer packed them up and sent them east, to Constantinople, to the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. The message was simple. There is no emperor in the West anymore. We won't be needing these. And then he exiled the boy to a castle near Naples with a comfortable pension. The last emperor of Rome lived out his days in a villa by the sea. We don't even know when he died. Here's what everyone gets wrong about this story. When we think of Rome falling, we picture fire, chaos, buildings collapsing, people running. That's not what happened on September 4th, 476. The city of Rome was hundreds of miles away from Ravenna. Most people in Rome didn't find out for days, maybe weeks. And when they did, Most of them shrugged, because Rome hadn't felt like an empire for a long time. The city that once had over 1 million people had shrunk to maybe 100,000. The great aqueducts were crumbling. The free grain that kept the poor fed had gotten unreliable. The Colosseum still stood. The Forum still stood. The streets still existed. But the energy was gone. 66 years before this, in 410 AD, an army of Visigoths had sacked Rome. That was the real shock. That was the moment the world went quiet. A historian at the time wrote that when news of the sack reached him, he couldn't speak for days. He said it felt like the light of the world had gone out. By 476, people had already processed that grief. They had already adjusted. The idea that Rome was eternal had already been quietly abandoned by most people living in it. So when Odoacer took over, most Romans didn't experience it as the end of an era. They experienced it as a Tuesday. This is the part that matters. Rome didn't fall on September 4th, 476. Rome fell slowly, across 200 years, one small failure at a time. It fell when the emperors stopped being chosen for ability and started being chosen for family connections. It fell when the gap between the rich and the poor got so wide that the army stopped feeling like it was fighting for something worth fighting for. It fell when the government started paying for everything by debasing the currency, making the coins smaller, using less silver, until the money was nearly worthless and prices for everything exploded. It fell when the soldiers at the edges of the empire stopped being paid reliably and started making deals with the very people they were supposed to be fighting. It fell when the politicians in Rome became so obsessed with fighting each other that nobody was watching the borders. Every single one of these things happened gradually. Nobody announced it. There was no single moment when a Roman woke up and said, "Ah, yes, today the empire begins its decline." It just kept getting a little worse, year after year, decade after decade, until the day a teenage boy handed his crown to a Germanic general, and nobody was surprised. The historian Edward Gibbon spent years studying this. His conclusion was stark. Rome wasn't destroyed from the outside. It was hollowed out from the inside. The external threats just walked through a door that was already open. Here's what I keep thinking about. The Eastern Roman Empire didn't fall in 476. Constantinople, the eastern capital, kept going. The emperors kept ruling. The army kept fighting. The roads kept running. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, lasted for another 1,000 years after the West collapsed. Same empire, different half. Completely different outcome. The difference wasn't geography. It wasn't luck. The East had been better managed. The emperors there had maintained the institutions. They had kept the army paid. They had kept the currency stable. They had kept the borders defended. Everything the West stopped doing, the East kept doing. And the East outlasted the West by 1,000 years. Meanwhile, in Ravenna, a teenage boy packed his bags and moved to a villa by the sea. He had ruled for 10 months. He never really ruled at all. His father ran everything. His father's soldiers overthrew him. His father was executed, and he was sent away to live quietly until the world forgot his name. The last emperor of Rome didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He just left. And the strangest part of this entire story is that an empire that had stood for over 1,000 years ended not with a war, not with an invasion, not with a revolution. It ended with a teenager handing over some purple robes, and nobody really noticing until now.